I'm going to cry now.
I'm with you on this. All right.
um, in which he was mesmerized and they were mesmerized, and then they led him. Did not want to do any of the EFT tapping. He thought it was crazy. And when Matthew and Chantal asked him if they could lead him in prayer with EFT, he said yes. And I watched these three kids just trust each other, fall into grace together. And I heard Matthew and Chantal say things that I didn't even remember that I said in our teachings over the years, but that they were living it, that they had access to it in every moment was astounding. And then I come back later that night and I said, well, where's JT? He's in his room. He's writing a speech. I'm like, what? He's writing a speech. He's going to go to school tomorrow for the first time in 2 months. And he's going to give a speech about how we should care about people who've experienced more tragedy than we have.
Today's all about grace. In the world, when what is missing, you get to bring. So we're bringing grace, joy, and love. And I have Dr. Lorilayden on the show with me. And yes, and a book. Now I get to give myself grace, embodying grace. And trusting yourself, your life, and your divinity. Welcome to the show. And how are you?
Thank you, Maureen. It's so great to be with a fellow East Coaster.
We went to talk about that, weren't we? All right. So if everyone doesn't know that, yeah, I'm born and bred in Brooklyn. When Brooklyn was Brooklyn and not the new thing, but the Brooklyn. That's me. But I'm a Cali girl. And we love it both. And yes, Lori, so give a little bit, tell them where you from and where you are in this world.
Yes. Well, I was born in Providence, Rhode Island. Grew up there, but really started traveling very early on. Actually moved to California and then got engaged and moved back to Rhode Island to get married. And as soon as I wasn't married anymore, I asked in a dream where the divine wanted me to be. And I started seeing images in a dream. This was after a near-death experience I had. And so I started looking at those images and I started trying to figure out where they were from. And long story short, it was a very odd image. So I flew out to California and drove up the 101 coast from Malibu, thinking that it was somewhere in that area. And I pulled off to the side of the road and cried when I saw the exact image. I didn't know it was Santa Barbara. It was just an image of this beautiful cove with hills and mountains hugging the hills in a very small space. And I just felt the energetic of it. And it was the exact image I had seen in my dream. And 6 weeks later, I moved there. And then I went, oh my, it's very expensive here. It's very beautiful. And the energy is amazing. But that's when the grace process came in, which is the subject of this book, which we'll talk more about. But I've been here for 20 years, and the synchronicities from being here, from simply choosing an image I saw in a dream, continues to blow my mind at following my heart and how everything falls into place when we follow our hearts.
So, and I love, so you in the book, first I want to read a quote from you, which was better than get a quote from. So this is in part 1, and then I want to get into the sign of the divinity and the it's
infinity heart circuit,
infinity symbol, right? But there's anyway, I want you to explain that. That really landed for me too. But this is again Dr. Lori with an I, and I love that. You are intimately connected to all things in the universe. You do make a difference in the world by harnessing the transformative power of grace. You become a beacon of light and healing for yourself and our world. Now envision a world in which everyone is living their divinity. And this is going to bring that up. I love this. And within that, what did you mean by that? And this really, you open the whole book up with this, and then we're going to go into the infinity symbol and how that really, that represents that. Take it away.
Thank you. You know, this message is particularly poignant at this time in our history. And of course, there's always an important time in our history to practice our own healing first. And that quote is really based on quantum physics that proves that we're all connected. And that's something I explain in the book. But truly, my message is when we are seeing all of this violence and horrors and tragedies in the world, the one most important thing we can do is turn inside and heal what we need to heal in ourselves so that we bring ourselves fully present in our hearts, which is a whole nother scientific, the energy of our heart, brain, body connection is what connects us to the divine. And so we can actually connect with our own divinity based on being able to regulate our physiology and really be fully grounded in our bodies. And that's how we have access to all of our divine gifts, which include creativity, problem solving, inner wisdom, even a sense of connectedness and transcendency, which is really what grace is. And we've been taught in some religions that grace is something that's very elusive and we have to depend on the divine to mete it out to us. In my experience, what I've found is that when I partner with the divine, grace drops in instantaneously. So this is really, the book is about how do we transcend our egos so that we can truly live from our divinity. And when you think about our egos, when have we experienced grace? When we've been in our egos. It comes in the dark night of the soul. It comes in silent meditation and prayer. It comes in deep physical and psychological pain. But then I looked at how did I receive grace when I was in gratitude, love, joy, and wonder? It drops in instantaneously. So what's the difference? When I'm clutching onto my ego, I only receive grace after I'm exhausted and surrender. And so the choice is, wait a minute, do I want to do it the hard way or do I want to do it the easy, fun way? And obviously it takes a bit to master that, but it's there. And practicing the grace process for the past 20 years all over the world, I just know how powerful it is.
And practicing grace around the world. Tell us about what you created in Rwanda, what you created for others, and what you have made the trainer model, and you made something sustainable that forever will bring forward.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. And this is all from following my heart. And so after this near-death experience, I asked, what is a healing tool that I can bring that will help people accelerate their healing? And I received this formula, which we'll talk about. But I kept saying in my meditation, a formula for healing? What? It didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I spent the last 20 years proving this formula works. And so in the fall of 2007, and you'll appreciate this, every year I set a big intention for what's next in my life. But be careful what you ask for. So I was ready to bring in my spiritual romantic partner. And I was very excited. I could see how tall he was. He had blue eyes. It was this, that, and the other thing. And I felt this excitement, this quickening, if you will. And then I received an email from someone in Rwanda, which is a country that has experienced a terrible genocide, which had always touched my heart, the subject of genocide and not wanting to see that happen again in our lifetime. But so the email was, I've just finished your book, can we translate it into Kinyarwanda, which is the language of Rwanda? And I said, yes. And I said, what else can I do? And they said, come here and work with our widow and orphan genocide survivors. And I said, yes. And then I said, how the heck am I going to do that? And that's a whole nother story and journey, but that would set me on a journey where I started going to Rwanda in 2007, and for the next 10 years would work there for 1 to 4 months a year. And my belief was, what did I want most as a child who had experienced a lot of trauma? I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to have a bright future. I wanted to love, and I wanted somebody to rescue me from what I was experiencing. And so that led me to Rwanda to say yes. And I was working with 100 orphan head of households. These are young people who were 6 to 8 years old at the time of the genocide. And they were given 2 to 4 or 2 to 6 other children to raise with no money, no place to live, conditions we couldn't possibly imagine. And as we were sharing our stories one day, and I shared a little bit about my story, which pales in comparison, but I felt this moment of grace that everything I had ever experienced up to this point was leading me to be with these young people and to help them heal. And we were healing ourselves. And, you know, you asked about the infinity heart symbol. And so they taught me, I realized I would do or repeat everything that happened to me in my life in order to connect with these young people and adopting many of them. But that infinity heart circuit is what I experienced. There seems to be a giver and there seems to be a receiver. But when we meet in the sweet spot in the middle, there's only love, and we are all transformed. There's no other. We are one. And so that has been the impetus that not only led me to work in Rwanda for 10 years, but also led me to Newtown, Connecticut, the scene of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012. And then from there to Parkland to work with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School people. And in the middle of that, called to Australia to work with Indigenous Aboriginal communities and refugee communities. So I've seen the power of this embodying grace framework in the most tragic of human circumstances. I've seen the miracles that can come out of tragedy. And it always comes from surrendering and following my heart. And surrendering doesn't mean giving up. It means giving into our divinity.
So you are living grace, and I want to expand on that when you went to Rwanda and then proceeded to the other places, you continue standing and bringing grace, joy, and love, that your ego's coming in and I'm reading it with you. I'm like, what am I going to bring? How can I possibly bring anything to support these children? And what did you find? How did they receive you?
So the orphan head of households, by the time I was working with them, were probably 17 to 24. But the war had interrupted their schooling, certainly interrupted their emotional development and so many other things. But I was bringing a form of trauma healing called emotional freedom techniques / tapping, which helps regulate the dysfunction that occurs from trauma. And up to that point, it's still very little known how trauma affects the brain, but we're finding from studies on the vagus nerve and all of this. But I was practicing this since the 90s, understanding that trauma is not just an emotional issue. There's a physiological response where you feel like you're in overdrive all the time because you get all those stress hormones going in, or you're just exhausted all the time and numb because all of those stress hormones are constantly flooding you. So I was bringing a very powerful tool that I didn't know would actually work with genocide survivors. And then I supplemented it with the Grace Process formula because I really believe we need a spiritual container for the work that we do to help us navigate this world. So the reason why I believe I was well received was all the work I did to prepare myself to be able to drop my ego and just simply be present to what needed to emerge in the moment, rather than trying to fix or being a savior or anything like that. And I also considered myself to be equals with them. We were partnering on this journey. I was beautifully well received, even in the face of a lot of skepticism about white people coming into their country and, taking over and all of that stuff. But it's a cherished connection that I have. I still have. We went on to come back to the United States to create a nonprofit called Create Global Healing, because I knew that just giving them trauma healing wasn't enough, that they needed, in my opinion, trauma healing, heart-centered leadership training, and economic sustainability skills so that they could heal, work, and lead us into a peaceful future. This is our next generation. And if we don't help our next generation heal, unfortunately, we see what happens now. The next generation become terrorists and or dysfunctional or whatever it is. So I did come up with, or I channeled this new form of humanitarian aid called Project Light. And we have a documentary about it on my website. You can see some of our journey, which then my vision was, if we connected young people, traumatized young people around the world to help heal each other, what would that look like? Then we have global citizens now. And this is what happened when I went to Newtown. I connected kids in Newtown with my kids in Rwanda. I call them kids, young adults, exactly. And that's where some real magic started. So it's been an incredible journey, not without its challenges, but being a social entrepreneur has some challenges, being in the mystery of the unknown.
I love that, social entrepreneur. And so the piece that I wanted to, that the way that they received you, right? Because it's like getting out of your own way and saying, I'm going to go do this. And, how are they going to receive me? That's the piece that it really opened my heart, and it showed who they are. Mm-hmm. And how did they receive you? What was because you were going in with a little bit of trepidation, right? But of course.
The only trepidation was that I would be grounded enough to partner with them in the way that they needed partnering, and not come in with any preconceived notions. And so I spent 3 months in very deep meditation and healing work, preparing myself. Could I sit with a woman whose family had been murdered in front of her and who is left living with AIDS as a torture aspect of the war? Could I sit with orphan head of households who have had no life at all and no parents to guide them? Could I sit with someone who'd murdered 100 people? And there were so many murderers as a result of this genocide that you only went to jail if you murdered 100 or more people.
Wow.
And, we just can't understand in this country. I'm going far afield here, but your question is how they received me. And I can say that because I really worked at being a partner with them and showing who I was and being vulnerable, and also using a lot of humor, and really my ego just dropped away into what is needed in this moment. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been doing the Embodying Grace framework and all of the other work that I had done. Because what we find in these communities, when a tragedy strikes, many people come in with good intentions. Unfortunately, they haven't done their own work first, and they end up interfering or intruding in the process of healing, because the focus then is on the volunteers versus the people they're serving, because they can't handle, really what's happening. Like in Sandy Hook, we had 35 volunteers. We could have had many more, but I trained them for a year before I let them, or they were in constant training because they were all eager to help. But when we did the role play of Can you sit with a mother who lost her 6-year-old boy in this tragic way? Can you sit with a child who was in the classroom? All these different things. As someone who wants to hold a healing space, we have to be very, very grounded in presence. And so they knew they needed to do this deep work themselves before they could sit with other people and help them with the trauma healing.
So what you're saying is that, and I think that the piece is that you really did do the work to be open, vulnerable, with grace, so they could then be with their trauma, their pain, and it's not about you and not fixing them. You got to see the mud with them.
Exactly. With confidence, well, with hopefully growing confidence that our protocols were working, and that we were partnering with them. And honestly, I receive more than, I don't even think about it as giving. I think about it as like just this heart experience. And if everyone in this world could have a heart opening experience with people like my orphan head of households in Africa, they would no longer feel this fear and hate and need for revenge, or all of these other things that come from trauma. We weren't born evil people. It comes from our trauma, that separation from the divine. And how we navigate that in our life is going to determine what the quality of our life will be. And the thing is, the Rwandans are genius. They're geniuses. We all want the same thing. And so when you recognize that everybody really wants to be seen, to be heard, to have a bright future, to love and be loved, that's where compassion and forgiveness can come in.
So speaking of that, because I love this connection between, what was the connection between the Rwanda, now young adults, and Sandy Hook? What were you able to facilitate?
Yeah, what they facilitated. So I was working with a mother and her son. The 12-year-old son had lost his 6-year-old brother in the shooting. And he was very, very angry, of course, and depressed, and he wouldn't go to school. And this is, just a short time, maybe 2 months after the tragedy. And I forgot my vision of hooking up young people around the world. But when I was working with JT, and you'll see this in the documentary, I thought to myself, he's 12 years old. He doesn't care what the adults have to say about anything. So who can he relate to who has experienced something like he has, right? Other young people at the time, they were maybe 21 or something like that. And so I said to JT, would you like to talk to my Rwandan kids? I call them Project Light ambassadors. They're ambassadors of light around the world. Yeah.
And they are. Continue though, but they are.
And so we needed a translator. And if you think of a 12-year-old's attention span is probably about 9 minutes. And this call went on for 90 minutes. And again, a translator. And I chose two, Matthew and Chantal. I never told them anything to say. I just explained the situation and where I was. And I sat back and watched a 90-minute call. And I'm going to cry now.
I'm with you on this.
In which he was mesmerized and they were mesmerized, and then they led him. Did not want to do any of the EFT tapping. He thought it was crazy. And when Matthew and Chantal asked him if they could lead him in prayer with EFT, he said yes. And I watched these 3 kids just trust each other, fall into grace together. And I heard Matthew and Chantal say things that I didn't even remember that I said in our teachings over the years, but that they were living it, that they had access to it in every moment was astounding. And then I come back later that night, and I said, well, where's JT? He's in his room. He's writing a speech. I'm like, what? And he said, He's writing a speech. He's going to go to school tomorrow for the first time in 2 months, and he's going to give a speech about how we should care about people who've experienced more tragedy than we have. And that's it right there. And he went on to raise money and send 2 of our kids to university.
And there's the grace that you were able to open and bring and share, and it continues to bring. And that's the grace that the world gets to have now.
Yeah.
And that's the work that you do. Thank you. The book. So what's going on now? Get a little bit into the book. The book is great. Obviously, the book, the video, the documentary, you, Dr. Lori, are just incredible. What was the intention behind the book, and where are you going now, and what's going on?
Yes. How much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding you. So the book is really, it is really an outcropping of the grace process, which I received after my near-death experience. And I did write a small book earlier about the grace process, but over the years, I've developed this framework that is so powerful that but I was a little busy traveling for 12 years. And I never got a chance to write it all down. But so this is the Embodying Grace framework, which includes learning to regulate your physiology so you can connect with your divinity and connect with all your gifts and talents. And then the grace process formula, and I'll explain it, which shows us how to move through whatever we're experiencing. The other piece that came through was the 5 stages of embodied grace, which, back in the day when I was pursuing my spirituality, I read about gurus sitting on the top of mountains and meditating, and it was lovely, but I don't have a roadmap of how to get there or what that was about. So I just started kind of reflecting on my own journey, and then I feel it was inspired as well. I've shown people that there's a path from separation to synergy. And so the 5 stages are: in separation, we feel alone, we feel martyred and victimized. We don't have a connection with God, or the connection we have with the divine is faulty, let's say. And then we move into stirring, which is that moment where we're trying to find out more. How can we heal? Why am I experiencing this? What's happening? That's when we go to all the workshops and we buy all the books, and it's always about the latest and greatest thing. But we stay in that stage the longest, because the next stage is really the fulcrum of this arc of surrender. And we surrender the ego, is really what I'm talking about, so that we can hear the messages, so we can follow our heart, which moves us then to stillness. And what I've experienced in stillness and taught other people to do is that literally I have the confidence that everything I need is available to me when I am in a state of deep stillness and connectivity. And that's when the answers drop in so gracefully. And then that leads us to synergy, which internal synergy, where we're relating to all the parts of ourselves in a loving way, so that we can then engage in external synergy with other partners and groups and collaborators. Because up to now, when we're trying to engage in peace, it's really a transaction, not a collaboration. It's all transactional. And we've got to move beyond the transactional into that infinity circuit of synergy, where there's abundance and food and healing and every opportunity for everyone on the planet. Which sounds Pollyanna, but it is possible if we redirect all these resources from war to personal inner healing and peace. Because we've got to have that peace inside of ourselves first. And given the current thing that's on our radar is the Middle East, and It's not about being for or against. It's about, in the embodying grace framework, it's about we want peace for everyone, including whoever appears to be the oppressor, including every single person. So if you take a stand against, we're still fighting.
Yeah.
Yes, we're against war, we're against violence, but I mean, if we take a stand, you back this person, and and make it it has its own form of judgment and violence that takes us away from a healing path, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. And again, the book really outlines this strategy, this formula, these phases. It really is a really well-written book, and it really landed where I am, and the path of that surrender. And
That means a lot, Maureen. Thank you. Yeah.
You're quite welcome. We will put in a few different in this the symbol, and again, that just so that landed in, and that's exactly that. And I could feel it. I could feel going to center and being in that place of that grace. So thank you for all that you do. What are you working on, and how can people get in touch with you? Do you have a gift for us? What does this look like?
Yes, I do have a gift for you, which is to download the 5 stages of embodied grace.
Okay.
And also, obviously, if the 5 stages lands with you, the going to Amazon and purchasing the hard copy or the Kindle copy of the book would be great. What I'm going to be doing in November and December in the book is another free gift, which is a downloadable meditation that I created just for this embodying grace framework. So if you buy the book, you'll find that link. You go to the link and sign up to download the meditation. And then I'll be offering a series of 3 or 4 free events where people can, kind of like what do you call it? A book club, if you will, to delve into how to apply the process and more ways to work with me. So it's dr.lorilayden.com, which I will provide for you as well.
Let me sum this up. The thing that I get to do. So the free book's down below. It's the 5
stages of embodied grace.
Of embodied grace. 5 stages of embodied grace. How great does that sound? And that's going to be grab the free thing. You'll get on Dr. Lori's email list, so you'll be able to be in the know when these workshops are coming up and get moved forward. The shy ones can come to the front, and then get the book. It's down below as well. And thank you for coming on. Thank you for all of the work. And we willed this. It's the perfect timing for you being here. So thank you.
Well, Maureen, you're delightful, and I love what you're doing with your show.
To continue, because again, we get to do this together, and that's where the joy and fun is. Till next time, everybody, get the book, grab your free gift. Bye.